The 2.6 banners are looking pretty ripe, so it can be hard to decide who you should spend your Stellar Jades on. So today, I aim to help you decide who to spend your precious Stellar Jades on, evaluating who will get you the most bang for your buck depending on your account setup. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. A quick note before we begin. This video serves as a nice TLDR of who you should consider pulling for. I'll be making individual videos on each character that's coming up to evaluate their individual pros and cons more in depth, which will help you better decide whether you want them or not. Okay, cool, let's go. Let's begin with Rappa. Her main huge quality is how wildly good she's going to be against imaginary weak content. If such a weakness exists in any endgame mode, she is going to make those stages look like an absolute joke. She is going to be the queen of pure fiction, decimating it with ease. So if your account is lacking a character who can absolutely wipe the floor with said mode, this lady of rhymes and sick beats is the right one for the job. You'll also be pleased to know that she works in every game mode. Yes, pure fiction may be her absolute best, but don't get it twisted. She will be more than competent in other ones, such as MOC and Apocalyptic Shadow. I'd actually like to give Apocalyptic Shadow a special shout out, because you really want to break weaknesses in that game mode. So if there's imaginary weaknesses on the boss, well then you're in luck, because Rappa is absolutely going to cook the enemies. There is genuinely going to be no imaginary choice that is going to be as efficient as Rappa. So for that reason, if you're lacking either pure fiction coverage or weakness break coverage for imaginary, then she is absolutely the right one for the job. I would say that if you're an older player who has more characters to cover more general pieces of content, and you want the pure fiction specific coverage or the imaginary weakness specific coverage, then Rappa is going to be perfect for your account. I don't recommend her as much for newer players because I feel like there are more flexible units that you could pick up, which will be of more value to your overall account. For example, Aventurine and Acheron are going to be running after Rappa's banner. Also, be cautious of her inflated performance. Yes, it is normal for Hoyoverse to always skew endgame content in favor of the current banner unit, but it's especially damning in break units cases, because the moment that their main weakness goes out of endgame, it'll be a lot more noticeable what their true performance is actually like. So keep in mind, yes, she is going to feel amazing on her release, and probably for a couple of weeks afterwards, but do know that that is not going to be her permanent power level. When she works, she is going to be amazing, but whenever she's not ideal, she's gonna feel more average. I'd also like to say that if you pulled for Linkshaw, well then shoot, you're in luck. One of Firefly's biggest weaknesses when being played with Linkshaw is the fact that her skill point economy without Firefly's E1 is a little Without Firefly's E1 that really lightens up the skill point economy of the team, you're not able to use Linkshaw's skill every turn, therefore you're not using as much of her fire toughness damage, which she has a lot of, and you're not giving Fuyuan more actions, meaning that you're missing out on even more fire toughness damage. Rappa has no such weaknesses. Her skill point economy is going to be fantastic. So you aren't going to need additional Eidolons on either character to make them worth using with each other, which is excellent for all of you Linkshaw fans out there. Now when it comes to her drawbacks, I would say the biggest one is actually her release period. She is a good character. Don't get it twisted, Rappa is not bad at all. Whenever she works, I presume that she is going to be fantastic because of how specialized she is. However, having Acheron and Aventurine rerunning right after her release, that's extremely rough. Anybody who doesn't have either of those two units are gonna be gunning for them. So unfortunately, it is better to prioritize those other high value units compared to Rappa. That's not even mentioning the fact that Sunday and Fuguei are coming up, and considering that both of those are very hyped units, I wouldn't be surprised if their kits are absolutely insane. The big problem is that Rappa is competing against Firefly. She is a break DPS, therefore that is her main competition. All break buffs will ultimately be Firefly buffs. I will say that Rappa does have the edge in pure fiction, but otherwise, we do have other pure fiction 5 stars. You can just build Himiko and Herta, you can play Fei Xiao, Herta Robin, there are other compositions to use for PF. I do think that Firefly is stronger on the whole, plus with Firefly's Light Cone, or if you don't have her Light Cone but you do have her E2, then you can brute force about 30k points or so with Firefly. Another issue with the ninja is that she doesn't have a weakness implant, whereas the common rider does. That doesn't just affect the units themselves, but also their whole team. Think about it. Gallagher is fire, Ling Sha is fire, and if we eventually get a break support who is fire, then they are also taking advantage of that implant. It is not only the primary unit. With that being said, the likes of Gallagher and Ling Sha do give Rappa fire coverage, so it's not like she can only do imaginary. If you have those two, then you can also take on fire, as long as you're getting breaks. Plus, you only need the main target boss enemy to have an imaginary weakness to cook. And whether you think that ignoring weaknesses is harmful to the overall game design of Honkai Star Rail or not, the fact that some units have it means that all similar units who don't have it are immediately at an inherent disadvantage. With that being said, if you really want what this ninja girl offers, she is absolutely going to impress you because she is really decent for a filler character. Her kit is not weak by any means, her problem is just her banner placement. So she's going into B tier for this patch's value rankings. Not because she is bad, she is great at what she does, but with Acheron Aventurine, Sunday, and Fuguei coming after her, yeah, it's rough. Then we move on to Don Heng and Imbibitor Lunae. So he's a decent imaginary DPS, but his problem is even worse than Rappa, because why would you get him when you could just get the ninja girl instead? She is going to suit all your imaginary needs, and there's no real reason to pick up the dragon over her if that's specifically what you wish to cover. We also just have far better DPSs now. For example, Acheron, who is going to be coming after him. He was also designed during a time where we only had MOC, so naturally, he's only good for MOC. You can't really use him in Pure Fiction, you can't really use him in AS as well as the others. The nice thing is that if hypercarries were to get buffed, as in like traditional hypercarries, then I do think that Dylan could potentially make a comeback, but I wouldn't count on that. I would rather wait for his next rerun after he receives his buffs, as opposed to pulling him now in the hopes that he may get buffs, because then if he doesn't get those, then you're gonna be pretty disappointed in the long term. Now, if you invest into him, sure, he'll be able to clear, he'll be able to do a comfortable amount of damage, but my issue is that you can invest far less into other DPSs and do a lot better with them. Another issue I have with him, which isn't that much of a problem because I feel like if you like this guy, you're gonna have Sparkle, but if you don't have Sparkle, then he's pretty rough on the skill points. I would say he's one of the clunkier DPSs to play, which back then was worth it because of how much damage he did, but nowadays, it's not so worth it anymore because we have better DPSs. You and I both know how Honkai Star Rail has pretty bad power creep. There's no real reason to pick up this outdated character unless you really like him. There's not much more to add here because he's quite straightforward. It's as simple as if you like his playstyle, you like the damage he does, then you can pick him up, but I don't really see his pull value, A, if you were there when we got Dr. Ratio, or B, if you want to pull for Rappa instead, because there's no reason to get him for Imaginary when there's those two scenarios. And if you're not into the Super Break playstyle, just wait for Dr. Ratio's rerun. We've gotten so many follow-up attack buffs in recent times, and Hoyo isn't showing any sign of stopping those anytime soon. He's going into C tier when it comes to the value rankings for this patch. Unfortunately, he is somewhat of a relic of the past that has long since been power crept by other more powerful DPS characters. Okay man, Acheron. We all know why this lady is strong. She is amazing in every game mode. She is amazing damage-wise. You can make her do a lot of damage whether you're a free-to-play or you want to invest a whole ton into her. It literally doesn't matter who you are or what type of player you are. Acheron is objectively a fantastic choice for any account because of how flexible she is. Her consistency across all game modes is also extremely impressive. I would say that she is better in MOC and AS than Pure Fiction, but she can be more than serviceable in Pure Fiction as well. She is the splendid all-rounder of your dreams, and she has held up quite well even with the release of the new, strong, powerful DPS units that have come out since her release, such as Firefly and Fei Xiao. She is well worth the pickup at the moment. If you're a new player that is lacking a good DPS, then she is so worth your time. She's very free to play friendly, just slap her on a good night's sleep well and get cooking. There's also such a wide variety of supports that she can take advantage of. Pella, E1S1 Black Swan, Jiao Cho, the Sustainless team with Welt, Sparkle. Shoot, even Robin! There are a lot of characters that you can use her with, so no matter your account composition, there is a 99% chance that you're gonna have a team available for her. If you're also somebody that has retired your Kafka Lycone because perhaps you don't play DOT anymore, then you can put that on Acheron and it's only 5% worse than her signature Lycone because her signature Lycone's main benefit is the fact that it can help Acheron generate more stacks whenever she moves. Kafka's Lycone can help you achieve the same effect. The same also applies to Silverwolf's Lycone, and because those two are older units which you may not use anymore, I would say that's a pretty effective use of your 5 stars. I'm personally partial to the Cav Swankaron team myself. It's usually my main team whenever I face endgame content, and I find that it's really nice in pure fiction. You'll have Acheron stacks for days, man. Just note that if you want to use Huohuo in this team, she's gonna need her E1, otherwise it's gonna be unsustainable to use her skill points wise, so you're gonna have to use somebody like Luocha who doesn't have to use their skill that often. The only real negative mark that I can put against Acheron is the fact that at E0, it's a little hard to use the Broken Harmony cast with her. There are ways to circumvent this. If you have Jiaoqiu and play a team of Acheron, Jiaoqiu, Sparkle, and a Sustain, the problem is usually that you would not have enough Acheron stacks, but because Jiaoqiu generates so many of them, Sparkle's crazy buffing is able to make up for the loss of Acheron's full talent proc, therefore resulting in a strong E0 Acheron team where you don't need to fulfill the full Nihility requirement. But if you don't have that guy, then you're gonna have to go with a double Nihility, or you're gonna have to run a Sustainless team with Welt. But that should not be a deal breaker. We all know how strong she is. I do think that she's gonna be good for at least another couple of months. I would like to warn you that Jingliu was an absolutely wild unit back then she got a rerun, and then she fell off not long afterwards. We're going into 3.x soon, and I would not be surprised if we did end up getting teams that are stronger than Acheron teams in the near future. But that's pretty cope. I don't really like going, oh, but in the future they might get really bad. Well, okay, that's the future. Right now, she is really good. And right now, I don't think she is going to suddenly become worthless in a couple of months. Because the thing is, she is so strong to the point where I believe that she's going to be filtered out of the meta slowly over time, not super abruptly. Also, the fact that she works in every game mode is such a major plus to her. For these reasons, I would say you can very safely pull for Acheron and be content in the idea that she would not get power crept really soon. She is absolutely going into S tier when it comes to the value rankings for this patch. Best Boy Aventurine. I really love this guy. I also believe him to be an absolute meta behemoth, especially with all the follow-up attack buffs that we've been getting in recent times. He's really good with Doctor Ratio, he's really good with Fei Xiao, he really helps her generate extra stacks actually. He's also not too bad for Acheron because his ult has a debuff in it, making him a pretty flexible sustain. It doesn't matter where you use him, he is going to be incredible at protecting your comp. I usually find that the shield he generates from his follow-up attack is fine enough for most fights, but if you sacrifice a skill point, the survivability of your team, oh my god, you are essentially immortal. I find that his effect res is usually enough to protect you from things like Alien Dream and Kafka's Domination. If you need survivability, then this guy is literally ideal. Now, my hot take is that I feel like the first thing that every new player should go for is a sustain, because let's be real, it is very difficult to survive in the endgame with just a Lynx or Natasha. So I would say that for new players, pick up an Aventurine. You are not going to regret it in the long run, and I would say the sustains, even if they do get better over time, they don't really lose full relevance on your account. For example, even though we would all agree that someone like Aventurine is better than the likes of Luocha, you can still use that guy for heavy skill point scenarios. So for that reason, I do believe him to be quite future-proof. While his damage isn't really anything to write home about, if you have a Robin in your team, you give him a signature light cone, you build him pretty well, his contributions aren't nothing. They are actually pretty good, especially in pure fiction when you're fighting a lot of trash mobs. Take it from me, who usually uses an E1 Huohuo. I use her because her E1 gives speed, she buffs attack, she buffs energy, we all know this. But when it gets serious, whenever the boss is absolutely cooking my team and I cannot survive, I bust out the good old Aventurine. And while he is going to be at his very best in follow-up attack teams and Acheron teams, he's going to work everywhere because sustains are inherently extremely flexible. So no matter who your main is, you are going to be able to make excellent use of him. You also absolutely get the best of both worlds with this guy. Def percent not only strengthens his shield, but it also gives him a crap ton of crit rate. Therefore, not only are you strengthening his shield whenever you build him on def, but you're also helping him do more damage. And then you can put a crit damage body on him, and there you go. Voila! Decent personal damage while also having the survivability of a freaking titanium tank. He also procs his follow-up attack very often, very quickly, therefore you will usually always have access to that little emergency shield of his. This dude is absolutely excellent. He is the main limited 5-star shielder that we have access to right now, and I cannot recommend him enough, no matter who you are. He is going into S tier in the value rankings, and while I think that a lot of people might consider this a controversial take, I'm putting him above Acheron. He is so worth your time. All in all, there are quite a few great choices to make this patch. I will be honest, I do think that the reruns are the main exciting thing here. Rappa's not bad by any means, but she definitely isn't the highlight when we've got Acheron and Aventurine on their way. Unfortunately, Heng and Imbibitor Lunae, I can't really see any incentive to pick him up anymore. But hey, if you're a simp that loves him, here he is. Ultimately, as always, pull for who you like, pull for who you think has the most fun playstyle, and pull for whoever creates the team that you like the most. I myself might be going for some high investment upgrades for my Aventurine. How about you guys? Let me know your pulling plans down below in the comments. Hopefully this video was able to tell you who'd get you the best bang for your Stellar Jades in Honkai Star Rail version 2.6. This has been Juice, signing out, and you should all realistically be pulling for Aventurine because he is best boy. I will be taking no arguments on this.